Welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG. My name is Pamela Cohn, and I'm delighted to serve as the host for this podcast series. We are so delighted to have with us today Carla Parsons, Principal Associate at Mills Reeve. Welcome, Carla. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Hi, Pam. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So I want to start with the question I always start with. Give us a little background on your career path and how you ended up with your current role in your current practice at Mills Reeve.
So I am a principal associate at Mills and Reeve, as you said, and I am a commercial lawyer. I specialize in complex commercial contracts across government sector, also for public and private clients. I also do various bits in construction, particularly in relation to net zero and green construction. And of course, as we're on Legal ESG, some ESG work as well. I originally trained as a lawyer many, many years ago, but took a career break and worked in retail for a while, including roles in sustainability and buying, which had a very sustainable aspect to it. I then, when I came back to law, joined Mills and Reeve as a project lawyer, doing the work I'm doing now. But when I joined, there was a real start of a push to do more ESG in law firms. And as I had been doing that in previous careers, also working closely with my father, Paul Watchman, who was very influential in ESG throughout his career, I was able to do a fair amount of ESG work, and I've been involved ever since.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned who your very famous father was, Professor Paul Watchman, because that leads into my next question. How much influence do you think your dad had on your becoming a lawyer generally, and then also kind of your chosen practice areas?
So I think it's hard. If you've ever seen my dad speak publicly, it was quite hard not to be inspired by him to some degree. He was full of stories. He genuinely loved being a lawyer, and he also had a very keen eye on justice and what he felt was the right thing to do. And he spoke to me a lot about why he enjoyed law, what he did all throughout my childhood. And I did a languages degree, which doesn't necessarily lead you into any one particular career, but I always thought perhaps law was the where I wanted to go. It was something he just absolutely loved. And he always said to me, he loved watching Desert Island Discs. And they always ask you, what would you take with you as your book to your desert island? And he said Hansard because he loved to read all the law reports because he was really passionate about it. So he was a huge influence on me deciding to go into law. He made it seem an interesting career choice. He made it seem like something where you could actively make a difference. And that was also why ESG was something that I always enjoyed working with him on. And he used to get me to help with a lot of research. From a young age, during holidays, I'd be asked to research into cocoa plantations or look at a law case that had an ESG aspect to it. So he was a huge influence. But I don't think I'm the only person he's influenced career wise, which is part of what I think we're going to talk about a little bit about the award that is in his honor at the Legal ESG Awards.
That's exactly right. And I would say that it's not just lawyers that he's influenced, because he was a huge influence when Daniel Smallwood and I first started doing the Legal ESG events. Out of nowhere, he reached out to us on LinkedIn and offered his support. And he and Paul Clemens Hunt were actually the keynote speakers at our very first Legal ESG event. So it was such an honor to know him. And frankly, we wouldn't be where we are today, but for the support he gave us very, very early on. So you mentioned the Professor Paul Watchman Young Lawyer of the Year Award, which is part of the Legal ESG Awards program, which is coming up in London. We are so honored that, number one, you allowed us to name this award in your dad's honor. And we specifically together chose to select the award that was going to young lawyers for the award to put his name on.
Yes,
and
that's right.
Tell us why. What led you to work with us to say, let's focus on young lawyers for this award?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it's not the obvious award you would associate with a legal award. And I'm not sure there are a huge amount of legal awards for young lawyers. Um, but when my dad died in July 2023, I had a huge number of emails and LinkedIn messages from people telling me how much of an influence or a mentor he'd been. And it's as you say, it wasn't just lawyers. I had lots of lawyers contacting me saying that at the beginning of their career, they had chosen to go into his area because they heard he was fun to work with. He was really inspiring. Um, or that at some point he'd kind of mentored them, etc. But a lot of people, exactly as you were saying, at the beginning of something, they'd reached out to him and said, I'm interested in this. Would you have any time to chat through? And he was always delighted to do that. It was something that he was really passionate about. He was, I'm not sure how many people will know this, but he was also a university lecturer. When I was very young, he taught. He was very good at kind of the whole teaching and mentoring aspect. So I knew that if I were ever going to do something for him, and I'd been thinking about this even before you and Daniel reached out to me, if I were ever to do something in with a legacy in mind, it would to be to do with that mentoring and aspect of giving people time and a platform. And then you contacted me and said, would I be interested in doing this? And we met up and we seemed to be very much of the one mind that it should be something that is to do with his mentoring, his support, his giving people a platform, which is exactly what this award seeks to do. And it is such a great thing that you and Daniel were on the same page as me. And it was, yeah, it was very easy. You came back we talked about it. You came back and said, what about young lawyer? And I instantly went, fantastic. And my dad really enjoyed talking to you, and it was the obvious match to do it with yourselves. And I was so thrilled when you did reach out.
And it was so fortunate for us too, because I think we were looking at it from the beneficiary perspective, the recipient of his mentoring and nurturing. So for us, it was just a perfect fit. So you're part of the judging panel for
Yes.
the submissions for the Young Lawyer Award. What specifically do you look for
Oh
in
gosh,
honor of your, right?
that's a really such a good question. And when we did this award last year, we had three amazing finalists. David Allfrey, who's a partner at Adolph Goddard and who's also hosting part of it today. Janetta Sidlikova, who set up her own enterprise to help spread ESG mentoring and teaching, and Joshua Dome, who set up his own climate change law practice. So you're getting very diverse candidates. So there's no one specific thing you're looking for, I think, when you're judging this. But when I'm reading through the applications, it's looking at the holistic picture. Is this just something that you're doing as a day job? Or is this something that you clearly are truly passionate about and you're trying to do something that makes a difference and also taking that mentoring and teaching aspect? And that's a bit, I think, for me, that I'm looking a lot at in these submissions. How much are the people involved going above and beyond and also mentoring and supporting other people and doing exactly what this award is about, trying to give people a platform to get involved with ESG, to expand their ESG knowledge and get involved in this area. I think also with ESG, it's can be challenging sometimes a traditional law firm for people to do this, to get involved, because it's not necessarily a traditional area where it obviously makes money or obviously brings in clients. It's not. It's different. It's a
Right.
big it's a real hot topic for clients, but it's different. So it can be hard, but it's seeing that kind of drive and determination in people. So I don't think there is one thing, but it's just brilliant to see the applicants and what they're doing. And I think my dad would be very proud.
And I think you're absolutely right. And since you mentioned last year's finalists, I'm going to quickly plug this year's finalists. T, who is at A&O Sherman, but is the leading person behind Legal Voices of the Future, and then Christina Chambers, who's with Mishkan Purpose. So yeah, those awards will be announced on the evening of June 8th during the networking reception during Legal ESG London, which is coming up July 8th and 9th. So give us your perspective on what's in store for ESG and for the lawyers practicing in ESG for 2025 and 2026? What's on the horizon?
So the things that we are definitely seeing clients ask for more training in, and that always gives us a clue to what's really causing them to stay awake at night. It's to do with reporting and greenwashing. And those are anybody who's listening to this has obviously got an ESG interest, so I'm preaching to the converted, but they are the hot topics. We've had a couple of new ESG reporting requirements come through in the last year or so, the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and CSDDD, which is the Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And for a lot of companies, they're for the first time having to try and think about how do they capture data, how do they report, what are their obligations. So that's definitely a major concern for clients. And greenwashing is the other one. Again, huge topic for conferences, but we are seeing more clients asking for training on greenwashing. And we are seeing more crackdown by enforcement agencies in greenwashing. We're seeing more international regulation and legislation coming out in these areas. So I think these are definitely sort of areas that will continue to grow. More litigation around greenwashing, more advertising greenwashing. But I think also on the flip side of that, there'll be a lot more green hushing because people will be terrified to get it wrong. But I think the main thing is if you have a good sustainability story, if you've generally got some credentials, people should be talking about them because that's what consumers want. And it's just unfortunate that companies may have used it to attract consumers, but not in the right way. So use us as lawyers as a resource to help you get that right. It's something that is so important to many, many consumers. So if you can talk about it in the right way. And of course, AI as well, I would say is the other major trend because if we're trying to capture data, as we're trying to navigate new things coming through in ESG, AI will become increasingly useful.
Useful, but AI is also an incredible energy suck, right? So
absolutely. And I suppose that's the other thing we need to that I didn't mention, but as we are coming up to 2030, when many companies have set as their net zero target, thinking more about how do you reduce that down. And I've seen a few things about law firms and use of AI and the green aspect, etc. So yeah, absolutely. We all need to be thinking about our carbon emissions. And the government in the UK have just reviewed quite a few things around construction and home building, etc. That'll be really interesting to see how the interplay between net zero ambitions, the kind of drive towards building more, etc. It's going to be fascinating few years, and everything that's going on in globally as well will surely influence what we're seeing in the ESG sphere.
well, speaking about everything that's going on globally, and given the political headwinds and pushback and rollback and pausing, etc., whatever language we want to use with respect to at least the term ESG. In that environment, what gives you hope?
Yeah, it is easy at the moment to feel quite disillusioned about the state of the world, and it's doesn't seem to be getting any better. But what does give me hope are things like the award we were talking about, because these are people who truly believe in ESG, putting themselves out there and trying to do some genuinely good things. Christina's been doing some fantastic work in supporting tribunals and some of the sort of campaign groups who have ESG issues, and Mingzi has been doing some great work with her Legal Voice of the Future to trying to educate and bring people forward. And the three finalists last year, David, Janetta, and Joshua, are fantastic examples of what gives me hope. People who are becoming senior in their industries, who are getting involved with a huge number of organizations, individuals to talk about ESG, to bring people forward in this area, to mentor them, and so on. And these are people from very different backgrounds, all some relation to the legal field, but different backgrounds who are getting involved and are just really inspirational individuals. So I think without a doubt, they give me hope.
Yes, I completely would agree with that. The Young Lawyer of the Year Award submissions certainly give me hope. But even looking at the submissions across the whole range of legal ESG awards, it's very encouraging and heartwarming and hopeful that
Yeah.
in general, we're moving in the right direction despite this environment.
Well, I think the range of people you get at these events, Pamela, is fantastic. And it shows how seriously companies are taking their ESG obligations and that it's not just a kind of talk the talk. People are genuinely walking the walk. And I felt really inspired coming away from last year's conference and hearing from such a great range of speakers. And you've got some fantastic people again this year. The fact that Adolfo Goddard hosting it this year, Clifford Chance hosted it last year. It shows it really does matter to these companies and people giving up their time to talk about this and to use their platform for good, essentially.
I completely agree. I can't wait to see you in July.
I'm very much looking forward to it.
And thank you so much for your time with us today. I'm sure our audience will enjoy listening to it.
Well, thank you very much, Pamela, and thank you for having me today.
My pleasure.